The morning sun rose over the quiet alien village, painting the sky in shades of orange and silver. Ethan Cole stood beside his small shuttle, running one last check on the controls. The machine was old, dented, and patched in several places, but after months of hard work, it was finally ready to fly. He had been stranded on this planet for nearly half a year. His landing had been an accident, a navigation error during a deep space mission. The village people had taken him in, offering food, shelter, and safety. They were different from humans, tall, with smooth blue skin and large dark eyes, but their kindness had been the same as anyone on Earth. Ethan had worked for weeks to repair his shuttle, scavenging parts from wreckage and trade goods from passing merchants. Now, at last, the engine was fixed, the navigation system was working, and he could finally return to human space. The village was peaceful that morning. Smoke rose from the cooking fires. Children played near the water stream. The people smiled at him, though their smiles carried a quiet sadness. They had known this day was coming. Ethan tightened the strap on his pack and glanced one last time at the huts and gardens. "You've all been good to me," he said to the village elder, a tall man named Varen. "But I have to go home. My crew is out there somewhere. My family. They don't know if I'm alive." Varen placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "We understand. The sky is your path, as the earth is ours." Ethan gave a small nod and turned back toward the shuttle. His mind was already on the journey ahead, plotting a safe course, avoiding pirate zones, and finding the nearest human colony. He was almost at the hatch when he heard the sound of light footsteps running toward him. "Wait!" a small voice called out. Ethan turned. A tiny alien girl stood there, her breathing quick, her eyes wide. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old in human years. She wore a simple cloth tunic and carried nothing but a small woven bag. "What is it, kid?" Ethan asked, trying to keep his tone gentle. The girl hesitated, gripping the edge of her tunic. "Please, save my sister." The words froze him in place. He glanced at Varen, but the elder looked away, his expression tight. "Your sister?" Ethan asked slowly. "What happened to her?" The girl stepped closer. "Her name is Suri. The black shells took her last night." Ethan frowned. He had heard whispers about the black shells, raiders from beyond the Red Canyons. They were said to be dangerous, armed with stolen technology, and without mercy. The villagers avoided even speaking their name. "Where did they take her?" Ethan asked. The girl's voice shook. "Beyond the canyon. To their stronghold. No one will go after her. They say it is too dangerous. But you—" She stopped, looking at him as if she already knew the answer she wanted. "You are strong. You have weapons. Please. She's all I have." Ethan looked back at his shuttle. The hatch stood open, the controls waiting for him. He could leave now. He could be in the next star system by tomorrow. He told himself this wasn't his fight. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "That's not my—" The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. She only whispered, "If you leave, she will never come back." The words hit harder than he expected. Ethan turned away, pretending to check his shuttle's panel, but his mind was suddenly restless. He remembered a time back on Earth when he had been the one needing help. A time when someone had stepped in, not because they had to, but because it was right. He closed his eyes for a moment. This planet was far from human space. No one here could face the black shells. If he left, Suri's fate was sealed. Varen finally spoke. "Ethan, this is not your burden. You have your own journey." Ethan looked at him. "And if it was your daughter?" The elder's lips pressed into a thin line, but he said nothing. Ethan took a deep breath, then turned back to the girl. "What's your name?" "Lyra," she said. "All right, Lyra," Ethan replied. "Tell me everything you know about where they took her." Lyra's eyes widened with sudden hope. "You'll help?" "I didn't say that yet," Ethan answered. But if I'm going to make a decision, I need to know what I'm dealing with. She quickly explained. The black shells had raided the village's outer fields during the night, taking food, tools, and a few villagers. Suri had been working near the water pump when they grabbed her. They left before anyone could stop them. The raiders traveled in skimmers, fast vehicles that could cross the canyon in hours. Their base was built inside the cliffs, protected by steel gates and guard patrols. As she spoke, Ethan's mind began to work. The description of the gates made him think of possible entry points. The mention of stolen tech suggested they might have energy weapons. Dangerous, but also predictable in how they worked. When she finished, Lyra looked up at him with silent hope. Ethan glanced again at his shuttle. He thought about the months he had spent repairing it, the chance to finally go home, the promise he had made to himself to survive and return. But he also thought about Lyra's small voice, the fear in her eyes, and the quiet truth she had spoken. If he left, the girl's sister would be gone forever. He sighed. All right, Lyra, I'll see what I can do. The relief on her face was immediate. Thank you, thank you. Varen stepped forward, worry in his eyes. Ethan, you know what you are walking into? I do, Ethan replied. But sometimes you don't walk away. The villagers watched as Ethan closed the shuttle's hatch, not to take off, but to lock it down for later. He removed his pack, pulling out only the essentials, a sidearm, a small toolkit, rations, and a portable scanner. He adjusted the strap across his chest and looked toward the red canyon in the distance. The sky above it shimmered with heat. Somewhere beyond those walls, Suri was waiting, and time was running out. Lyra stood beside him, ready to lead the way. Let's go, Ethan said. They began walking, leaving behind the safe borders of the village. The sound of the stream and the laughter of the children faded behind them, replaced by the quiet hum of the wind across the rocky plain. The journey had begun, not to the stars as Ethan had planned, but into danger, for the sake of a promise he hadn't even made until now. The path to the Red Canyon was long and dry. The ground cracked under their feet, and the air shimmered in the midday sun. Ethan kept his eyes on the horizon, scanning for movement. He didn't like open ground. It gave no cover. Lyra walked. Beside him, her small legs working hard to keep up. She carried nothing but her little woven bag, which swung from her shoulder with every step. Ethan noticed she was holding it tightly, as if it was the only thing she had left in the world. You shouldn't have followed me this far, Ethan said, glancing at her. I have to, she replied. You don't know the way, I do. Ethan didn't argue. She was right. This was her home. She knew the land far better than he ever could, but he also knew the risk. If the black shells caught them both, there would be no one left to tell. The village, what happened? After an hour of walking, they stopped to rest under the shade of a twisted tree. Ethan handed her a small water bottle from his pack. Drink slowly, he said. She nodded, taking careful sips. Her big dark eyes looked at him with a mix of gratitude and worry. Why are they called the black shells? Ethan asked. Because of their armor, Lyra answered. It's dark and hard, like the shell of a beetle. It covers their whole body, even their faces. People say they were once like us, but they chose a different way of living. Now they only take, never give. Ethan had seen raiders before, human ones. The description was too familiar. A group like that would be dangerous no matter what planet they came from. What happens to the people they take? He asked. Lyra hesitated, her voice soft. Some are made to work for them. Others, they disappear. Ethan's jaw tightened. He didn't need to hear more to understand the urgency. When they resumed walking, Ethan kept his pace steady. The canyon's walls began to rise ahead, tall and red against the bright sky. From a distance, they looked like a fortress built by nature itself. Tell me about Suri, Ethan said as they walked. She's my older sister, Lyra said with a faint smile. She takes care of me since our parents went away. She works hard. She's brave. Her smile faded. But she can't fight the black shells. No one can, except maybe you. Ethan didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure if he liked the idea of being the only one who could stand against them. He had his skills, yes, but he was still one man against many. By the time they reached the canyon's edge, the sun was dipping lower, casting long shadows over the rocks. Ethan crouched near the rim and studied the view. The canyon floor stretched below them like a giant scar, with narrow paths winding through its depths. "This is where they go?" he asked. "Yes," Lyra whispered, pointing to a trail that snaked between two cliffs. "It leads to their gates. The path is dangerous. There are things in the shadows." Ethan checked his gear. His sidearm was charged, the toolkit secured, and his portable scanner ready. He knew he couldn't storm a fortified base without a plan. "We can't just walk in," he said. "We need to know their patrol routes, their defenses, and where they're keeping your sister." Lyra nodded. "I can show you a place where we can see their gates from far away. My sister used to take me there to watch the canyon birds." They began the careful descent into the canyon. The walls rose high on both sides, blocking most of the light. The air here was cooler, but the silence was heavy, broken only by the crunch of their footsteps and the distant call of strange birds. Halfway down, they found the first sign of the black shells, deep tracks in the dirt made by skimmer vehicles. The lines were sharp, fresh. Ethan knelt to examine them. "They were here recently," he said. Lyra looked nervous. "They move quickly. They will take Suri far away if we wait too long." Ethan understood the fear in her voice. Speed was important, but so was information. A reckless move could get all of them captured. As they followed the tracks deeper, the canyon narrowed until they reached a small ridge overlooking a wider clearing. From here, Ethan could see the far wall of the canyon and the black shells. Stronghold. It was built into the rock itself, a dark steel gate set between jagged cliffs. Tall watchtowers stood on each side, with figures in black armor scanning the surroundings. The faint hum of engines and machinery drifted through the air. "That's it," Lyra whispered. Ethan studied every detail, the number of guards, the placement of lights, the way the skimmer tracks led directly inside. He spotted a small ventilation shaft halfway up the cliff wall. It was narrow, but maybe just wide enough for him to fit through if he climbed. "They have stolen technology," Lyra said quietly. "Weapons that burn, machines that fly. Our people have nothing like it." Ethan kept his eyes on the gate. "Weapons can be dangerous, but they can also be predictable. Every weapon has a weakness. They stayed hidden, watching the patrols. Change." Ethan noted the timing. Every 15 minutes, the guards swapped positions. He also noticed that the canyon's shadow covered the left side of the base in near darkness as the sun set. That would be the best time to approach. As the sky turned a deeper shade of gold, Ethan leaned back against the rocks. "We'll go tonight." Lyra's eyes widened. "Tonight? But every hour we wait, they could move her farther away," Ethan said firmly. "We'll wait until the sun is gone, then we'll move fast and quiet. No mistakes." Lyra swallowed hard, but nodded. "I'll follow your lead." They found a small cave nearby to rest until nightfall. Ethan gave Lyra half a ration bar, which she ate slowly. He sat in silence, checking his sidearm again, running through the plan in his head. It wasn't perfect. No plan ever was. But he had faced worse odds before. Still, the weight of responsibility felt heavier this time. This wasn't about survival. It was about saving someone he had never met, simply because it was the right thing to do. As darkness settled over the canyon, the hum of the raider base grew louder. The towers lit up with pale lights, but the shadows on the left side deepened, just as Ethan had predicted. He looked at Lyra. "Stay close. Don't make a sound." She nodded, clutching her woven bag tightly. Ethan stepped out of the cave, the cool night air brushing against his face. Every instinct told him to be careful. One wrong move could end it all. Somewhere beyond that gate, a young girl was waiting, and he was the only one who had a chance to bring her home. And tonight, the first move would be his. Night had fully settled over the canyon. The walls loomed high on each side, their jagged shapes cutting sharp lines against the starry sky. The wind moved softly through the stone paths, carrying faint echoes that made it hard to tell where sounds were coming from. Ethan crouched low, his eyes scanning the shadows ahead. Lyra stayed close behind him, her small footsteps careful and quiet. Every few seconds, she would glance back, as if expecting the darkness to come alive. They moved along the left side of the canyon just as Ethan had planned. This side was deep in shadow, hidden from the main towers of the Black Shell's base. The air smelled faintly of metal and oil, a sign that they were getting closer. "Keep your head down," Ethan whispered. Lyra nodded without speaking. Satue. Path narrowed suddenly, forcing them to walk single file along a ridge no wider than a plank of wood. Below them was a drop into darkness, the bottom hidden from sight. Loose stones shifted under Ethan's boots, making small clicks that echoed too loudly in the silence. "Watch your step," he warned. Halfway across, a strange screech echoed from somewhere above. Lyra froze. A shadow passed overhead. A large, bird-like creature, its wings long and thin, with claws that scraped against the stone wall. Its glowing eyes locked onto them for a moment, then it gave another screech and flew off into the darkness. "What was that?" Ethan asked quietly. "Canyon razor wing," Lyra whispered. "It only attacks if it is hungry." Ethan didn't like the sound of that. "Let's hope it already had dinner." They continued, reaching a wider section of the path where a small stream of water trickled down from the canyon wall. Ethan let Lyra drink, but only for a moment. They couldn't stop for long. A little further on, the ground sloped downward into a larger open space. Here, the moonlight reached them, revealing tall stone pillars scattered like giant teeth. The skimmer tracks they had seen earlier cut through the middle, heading straight toward the base. Ethan knelt, placing his hand on the tracks. The edges were still sharp. "Recent. Maybe within the last 2 hours," he said. Lyra's face tightened. "That means Suri is still inside." The thought gave them both a small push forward, but the open space made Ethan uneasy. There was no cover here except for the stone pillars, and the hum of the raider base was louder than ever. They moved from pillar to pillar, keeping low. The distant sound of engines rumbled from behind the steel gates ahead. Faint voices carried through the canyon, harsh, mechanical tones, distorted by helmets. When they reached the final pillar before the open ground, Ethan raised a hand, signaling Lyra to stop. Beyond this point, they would be in full view of the towers. He scanned the area, his eyes searching for movement. "There," he whispered, pointing to a small side path along the cliff wall. It was narrow and half hidden behind loose rocks, but it seemed to lead toward the left side of the base, exactly where the shadows were deepest. They crept toward it, but halfway there, a sudden metallic clang echoed from the tower. A beam of pale light swept across the open ground, moving toward their position. "Down!" Ethan hissed. They dropped behind a fallen rock just as the light passed over. The beam lingered for a few seconds, then moved on. Ethan's heart slowed slightly, but he kept them still until the tower guard turned away. Once it was safe, they slipped into the narrow path. The air here was colder, and the walls pressed close on both sides. Ethan could hear a faint humming sound ahead. As they rounded a bend, he saw the source. A ventilation shaft set into the cliff covered by a metal grate. "That's an access point," Ethan whispered. "If we can get inside, we might avoid the main gate." Lyra tilted, her head. "Can you open it?" Ethan examined the grate. It was secured by a simple latch mechanism, though rusted. He pulled a small tool from his belt and began working. The metal creaked quietly as he loosened the latch, finally pulling the grate free. A rush of stale air blew past them, carrying the faint smell of machinery. "It's tight, but I can fit," Ethan said. He turned to Lyra. "You'll have to stay here until I open the way from inside." Her eyes widened. "No, I'm coming. I can help you find Suri." Ethan hesitated. The shaft was small, and it would be dangerous for her inside. But he could see the determination in her face. The same determination he had seen in himself when he was younger. "All right," he said finally. "But stay right behind me, and if I say stop, you stop." They climbed into the shaft, crawling through the dark, narrow tunnel. The sound of their movement echoed against the metal walls. After several minutes, they reached a point where the shaft split in two. Ethan checked his scanner. One direction led toward heat signatures, likely machinery, while the other had faint signs of life. "This way," he whispered, taking the second path. Soon, a faint orange glow appeared ahead. They reached another, grate peeking through to see a wide corridor inside the base. Raiders in black armor walked past, their boots clanging on the metal floor. The hum of generators filled the air. Lyra tugged at Ethan's sleeve. "That's the place they keep prisoners," she whispered, pointing toward a heavy door at the far end. Ethan's pulse quickened. They were close. But before they could move, a loud alarm blared somewhere deeper in the base. The raiders' voices grew sharper, and two of them hurried toward the corridor where Ethan and Lyra watched. "They're on alert," Ethan murmured. "We need to move before they seal everything." He began loosening the grate, but a voice from below barked orders, in a language he didn't understand. The raiders below turned sharply, scanning the shadows. Lyra's eyes were wide, but she stayed silent. The grate came loose just as the nearest guard started toward their position. Ethan dropped quietly to the floor, helping Lyra down. They pressed against the wall, moving toward the heavy door before the guard could see them. The corridor seemed longer than it was, each step slow and tense. At last, they reached the door. Ethan placed his scanner against the lock. It wasn't simple, but he had worked with worse. As the device worked, he kept glancing back. The guard was getting closer. The scanner beeped softly. The lock clicked, open. Ethan pushed the door just enough to slip inside, pulling Lyra with him. They closed it quietly, standing in darkness. From somewhere inside, faint voices and the sound of chains echoed. Suri was here. The room was dim, lit only by a single hanging lamp that swung slightly, casting moving shadows across the walls. The air was cold and smelled of dust and old metal. Ethan stood still for a moment, letting his eyes adjust. He could hear the faint clink of chains somewhere ahead and the low murmur of voices. Lyra's small hand tightened on his arm. "Stay close," Ethan whispered. They moved quietly along the wall until the shadows gave way to a larger open space. Several metal cages stood in a row, each holding one or two alien villagers. Their clothes were torn and their faces showed fear and exhaustion. Lyra's eyes darted from cage to cage. "Suri!" she whispered urgently. Ethan followed her gaze to the last cage at the far end. Inside, a young alien woman sat on the floor, her knees drawn to her chest. Her skin was the same pale blue as Lyra's, but her hair was longer, and her eyes carried a tired strength. Lyra ran to the bars and gripped them tightly. "Suri!" Suri's head lifted. When she saw Lyra, her eyes widened in shock. "Lyra, what are you doing here?" "I came to save you," Lyra said, her voice breaking slightly. "Ethan is helping me." Suri looked at Ethan, confusion mixing with hope. "A human?" "No time for introductions," Ethan said quietly. He knelt beside the cage and examined the lock. It was a heavy mechanical design, strong, but not impossible. He pulled a tool from his pack and started working. As he worked, one of the other prisoners whispered, "Careful. The guards check here often." Ethan kept his focus on the lock. "Then we'd better be quick." The lock clicked after a few tense seconds. Ethan swung the door open, and Suri stepped out, hugging Lyra tightly. But before Ethan could say anything, the sound of heavy boots echoed down the corridor. "They're coming," one prisoner warned. Ethan looked at Suri. "Can you walk?" "Yes," she said firmly. "Then move," Ethan ordered. He led them toward the side of the room, searching for another exit. He spotted a service door half hidden behind a stack of crates. Just as they reached it, the main door burst open, and two guards in black armor entered, their weapons raised. Ethan reacted instantly. He fired his sidearm, the shot striking the first guard's shoulder and sending him crashing into the wall. The second guard shouted something into a comm device and rushed forward. Ethan grabbed a loose crate and shoved it into the guard's legs, knocking him off balance. "Go!" Ethan shouted. Lyra and Suri slipped through the service door, Ethan right behind them. The narrow hallway beyond was poorly lit, filled with the hum of pipes and machinery. They ran, their footsteps echoing loudly. "Where does this lead?" Ethan asked Suri as they moved. "Toward the cargo bays," she said, breathing hard. "There's a way to the canyon from there." That was good news, if they could reach it. Behind them, the alarm blared, loud and sharp. Red lights began, flashing along the walls. The base was now fully alert. They turned a corner and nearly ran into another patrol. Ethan grabbed Suri and Lyra, pulling them behind a large pipe. The patrol passed quickly, too focused on the alarm to notice them. Once the path was clear, they kept moving. The hallway sloped downward, and soon they reached a wide open space, filled with stacked crates, barrels, and skimmers. "This is the cargo bay," Suri said. Ethan scanned the area. There were no guards in sight. Yet. "We need one of those skimmers," he said. "It's the fastest way out." They moved toward a sleek black skimmer parked near the bay doors. Ethan climbed into the driver's seat and began checking the controls. The design was different from human tech, but the basics were similar. "Get in," he told them. Before they could, the sound of running boots filled the bay. Several guards appeared from the far side, weapons ready. Ethan powered up the skimmer, the engine humming to life. The guards shouted and opened fire. Energy bolts struck the floor and crates around them. Ethan swung the skimmer toward the bay doors, motioning for Suri and Lyra to hold on. With a sharp jolt, the skimmer sped forward. Ethan hit a control to open the bay doors, and the massive steel panels began to slide apart. A guard stepped in, front of them, aiming his weapon. Ethan jerked the controls, swerving sharply. The skimmer slammed into a crate, sending it crashing into the guard and knocking him aside. The doors were almost fully open now, revealing the dark canyon beyond. Ethan pushed the skimmer to full speed, and they shot out into the night air. The cold wind rushed past them, but Ethan didn't slow down. He knew the black shells wouldn't let them go without a fight. "Hold tight," he said over the roar of the engine. They sped through the canyon, the path twisting and turning. Behind them, the sound of pursuing skimmers grew louder. "They're coming after us!" Lyra shouted. Ethan glanced back. Dark shapes were closing the distance, their engines glowing faintly in the shadows. He gritted his teeth. "Then we make this difficult for them." Up ahead, the canyon split in two. Ethan took the narrower path, weaving between sharp rock formations. The pursuing skimmers followed, but the tight turns made it harder for them to keep up. One of the raiders fired, the shot glancing off the side of Ethan's skimmer. Sparks flew, but the vehicle held together. "Ethan!" Suri shouted. "There's a rock shelf up ahead. If you pass under it, the path curves sharply. They might crash." "Let's find out," Ethan replied. He aimed the skimmer toward the low shelf, ducking as they passed beneath it. The pursuing raiders tried to follow, but the sudden turn caught two of them off guard. One slammed into the canyon wall, the other flipped onto its side. The remaining raiders slowed slightly, wary of more traps. Ethan used the moment to speed. ahead, putting as much distance as possible between them and their pursuers. After several more turns, the canyon widened, and the sound of the raiders faded. He finally slowed the skimmer, letting the engine cool. The three of them sat in silence. For a moment, catching their breath, Shuri placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Thank you. I didn't think I'd ever leave that place." "We're not safe yet," Ethan said. "We have to get you back to the village." Lyra smiled faintly. "You came for her, just like you said." Ethan didn't answer. He simply steered the skimmer toward the distant lights of the village, knowing the black shells might still be out there. And the fight wasn't over. The skimmer's engine roared through the night, echoing off the canyon walls. Ethan kept his hands steady on the controls, guiding the craft through the twists and turns. The wind cut against his face, carrying with it the faint metallic scent of the raiders' vehicles. Behind them, the hum of pursuing engines returned, faint at first, then growing louder. "The black shells had regrouped. They're back!" Lyra shouted, turning to look behind them. Ethan didn't need to look. The sound told him enough. "Hold on," he said, pressing the throttle harder. The skimmer surged forward, its frame shaking from the speed. Shuri gripped the edge of the seat. "Can we outrun them?" "Maybe for a while," Ethan replied. "But they're faster in a straight line. We'll need to make the canyon work for us." The path ahead narrowed, forcing Ethan to slow slightly to avoid scraping the sides. The moonlight barely reached this part of the canyon, leaving most of it in shadow. Rocks jutted out like teeth, ready to tear apart any skimmer that took the wrong turn. Ethan's eyes flicked between the path ahead and the rear view. 3 raider skimmers were closing in. The faint glow from their engines shimmered like the eyes of predators in the dark. The first shot came from behind, a bright bolt of energy that zipped past and exploded against the canyon wall, sending a shower of dust and pebbles over them. "Down!" Ethan shouted. Lyra ducked, clutching her woven bag tightly, while Shuri lowered her head. Another shot followed, hitting the ground so close that Ethan felt the vibration through the skimmer's floor. He jerked the controls to the left, swerving into a side path. The move was sudden enough to throw the raiders off for a moment, giving them a short lead. "This path is rough," Shuri warned, glancing ahead at the uneven ground. "That's the point," Ethan said. "If it's rough for us, it's rough. For them, too." The skimmer bounced hard over a rocky rise, then dipped sharply. Ethan used the momentum to swing around a tall stone pillar, vanishing from the raiders' direct line of sight. For a moment, the sound of pursuit faded, replaced by the low hum of the skimmer and the whistling wind. But it didn't last. The hum of engines returned, this time closer. "They know this canyon," Ethan muttered. "They're trying to hurt us." "Hurt us where?" Lyra asked. "Into open ground," Ethan said grimly. "Where they can surround us." He scanned the canyon walls, searching for an escape. Then he spotted it. A narrow slope leading upward toward a cluster of overhanging rocks. If he timed it right, they could reach the top and use the high ground. "Hold tight," Ethan said, turning sharply toward the slope. The skimmer's engine whined in protest as it climbed the uneven path, dust and loose stones scattered behind, them making the climb slippery. The raiders followed, their engines roaring louder with the effort. One of them fired again, the bolt skimming just above Ethan's head. They reached the top, a wide ledge overlooking the canyon below. Ethan didn't stop. He steered toward a gap between 2 large boulders, knowing what lay beyond. "What's so down there?" Shuri asked. "A straight drop," Ethan said. "But I'm not planning to drive off." Instead, he swung the skimmer sideways, using it as cover while he reached into his pack. He pulled out a small explosive charge, one of the last pieces of tech he had salvaged from his shuttle repairs. "What are you doing?" Lyra asked, eyes wide. "Making sure they don't follow us," Ethan replied, setting the timer on the device. The raiders' skimmers burst onto the ledge, engines growling. Ethan tossed the charge toward the slope they had just climbed. It landed near the edge, beeping softly. "Cover your ears!" Ethan shouted. The explosion lit the night with a sharp flash, shaking the ground. Rocks from the ledge broke loose, tumbling down the slope in a heavy cascade. The path crumbled, sealing the way behind them. Two of the raider skimmers swerved just in time, avoiding the falling rocks, but the third wasn't so lucky. It was caught in the collapse, its engine whining before vanishing in the dust. For a moment, there was silence except for the settling of debris. Ethan exhaled slowly, lowering his weapon. "That should slow them down," he said. "But not stop them," Suri reminded him. Ethan nodded. "That's why we keep moving." They crossed the ledge and descended along another slope, this one leading to a different canyon route that curved toward the village. The ride was rough, but Ethan kept the skimmer steady, avoiding the worst of the rocks. The stars overhead shifted as the canyon opened slightly, giving them a clear view of the night sky. The village lights were still far away, small and faint against the darkness. "We're getting closer," Lyra said with hope in her voice. "Close doesn't mean safe," Ethan replied. "The black shells won't give up easily. If they can't, catch us here. They might try again near the village." Suri frowned. "Then the village will be in danger." "That's why we'll make sure they don't follow us that far," Ethan said firmly. They pushed on, navigating through more twists and narrow passes. Several times Ethan slowed to listen for the sound of engines, but each time the canyon was quiet. It wasn't until they reached a fork in the path that he heard it again, the faint hum coming from the right side. They found another way. "Around," Ethan said, tightening his grip on the controls. "How far?" Suri asked. "Far enough that we still have a chance," Ethan answered. He chose the left path, a longer but more difficult route filled with sharp turns and steep drops. The raiders would have to slow down if they wanted to follow without crashing. The skimmer weaved through the maze of rock, the moonlight flashing in and out as they passed under overhangs. Every sound seemed louder now, the scrape of the skimmer's hull against a narrow wall, the rattle of loose stones under the wheels, the constant rush of air. At last, they reached a rise that opened into a flat stretch of ground. In the distance, the soft glow of the village lights grew brighter. "We're almost there," Lyra said, her voice both relieved and exhausted. Ethan allowed himself a small nod. Almost. But deep down, he knew the black shells might not stop here. Raiders didn't forget a challenge, and now they had a reason to hunt him. For tonight, however, his focus was simple. Get Suri and Lyra home and prepare for whatever came next. The chase had ended, and for now, but the fight was far from over. The village lights grew closer as the skimmer rolled across the final stretch of rocky ground. Ethan slowed the vehicle, careful not to alert anyone in the village to their arrival. The night was quiet, save for the soft rustle of wind through the small trees and the faint gurgle of the stream that ran past the huts. Lyra's hand never left Suri's, and both of them stared ahead with wide, tired eyes. The journey had been long and dangerous, but it had brought them safely back. "We're home," Lyra whispered, almost to herself. Ethan nodded, keeping his eyes on the path. Almost, they reached the edge of the village. Shadows shifted in the small huts as lights flickered in the windows. A few villagers had begun to wake, drawn by the sound of the skimmer, but they stayed back, unsure what was happening. Ethan brought the skimmer to a stop near a small open area. He cut the engine and exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. His face was streaked with dust and sweat, but there was relief in his posture. Suri turned to him, her eyes shining. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know how to repay you." "You don't have to," Ethan replied. "You're safe, and that's enough." Lyra hugged her sister tightly. "I thought I lost you," she said, her voice trembling. Suri held her sister close, whispering words Ethan couldn't hear. Ethan looked at the village, feeling a warmth he hadn't expected. For months, This planet had been strange to him, and yet its people had shown him kindness and trust. Now, after risking everything, he was part of their story. Varen, the village elder, stepped forward from the shadows. His expression was calm but serious. "You have done more than anyone could expect," he said to Ethan. "You have risked your life for one of our own." Ethan shrugged. "I did what anyone would do?" Varen smiled faintly. "Perhaps, but the black shells are not easily defeated. They may return." Ethan nodded. "Then we'll be ready." Suri and Lyra began, moving toward their home, the small beams of light from their huts illuminating the path. The two girls disappeared into the warmth of the village, leaving Ethan standing alone for a moment. He turned his gaze toward the night sky. His shuttle waited at the outskirts of the village, ready to carry him home. Earth, family, his crew, all waited for him. He had come to save one life, but now he faced a choice. The village had become more than a temporary stop. He had come as a stranger, but he was leaving as someone who had touched lives, and whose own life had been changed. A small voice broke his thoughts. "Are you leaving now?" Lyra asked, appearing behind him. Ethan nodded. "I have to." "There. Are others waiting for me?" "My journey isn't over yet." She looked down, quiet for a moment. Then she lifted her eyes to meet his. "Thank you for saving my sister, and for helping me believe there are good people out there." Ethan knelt to her level. "You're brave, Lyra, never forget that." She smiled faintly. "Will you ever come back?" Ethan hesitated. He wanted to say yes, but he didn't know. Space was unpredictable, and the galaxy held far more dangers than this quiet canyon. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I promise. I will always remember this place, and I will remember you." Lyra nodded, a small but determined smile forming. "Then that's enough for now." He stood and adjusted his pack, glancing once more at the village. The huts, the stream, the people, all seemed peaceful, as if the danger had never existed. Yet he knew that peace was fragile, and the black shells would not be easily forgotten. Ethan walked toward his shuttle. The metal gleamed faintly under the moonlight. He ran a quick check on the controls, ensuring that everything was ready for takeoff. Before he climbed in, he paused and looked back at the village. From the shadows, Varen watched him silently, a hint of respect in his eyes. Ethan gave a small nod. Then, with a deep breath, he activated the engines. The soft hum grew louder until the shuttle lifted from the ground, hovering just above the rocks. Lyra waved, and Suri appeared beside her, waving as well. Ethan felt a small pang in his chest, the kind of feeling that comes from leaving a place you have come to care about. "Goodbye, Ethan," Lyra called. "Goodbye," he replied, his voice steady despite the emotion in his chest. The shuttle rose higher, leaving the village behind. The lights grew smaller and smaller until they vanished beneath the shadow of the canyon walls. Ethan guided the craft toward the horizon, toward the stars, and toward home. As he climbed higher, he thought about the journey they had all endured, about bravery, about trust, about the small choices that could change lives. He thought about the courage of two sisters and the strength of a village that had offered everything to a stranger. Somewhere, far below, the canyon lay quiet again. The black shell's base would remain, a shadow in the cliffs, but tonight the village was safe. Tonight, children would sleep without fear, and families would gather without worry. Ethan let out a deep breath, allowing himself a small smile. The galaxy was vast, and danger would follow him again. But this night had shown him something important. Even one person could make a difference. Even one choice could save lives. He glanced back at the stars above, the endless points of light, stretching into infinity. Home awaited, but he knew he would carry the memory of this village, of Lyra, of Suri, of Varen, and all those who had shown him kindness, wherever he went. The shuttle's engines purred steadily, cutting through the night sky. Ethan focused on his path forward, but in his heart he held a quiet promise that he would not forget the canyon, the village, or the two sisters who had changed his life. And as the first hint of dawn touched the horizon, Ethan knew that no matter what dangers the universe held, courage and hope would always find a way to shine. The journey had ended, but its impact would last forever.